Our second speaker tonight is a good friend of mine, Representative Priscilla Giddings. She serves as representative for District 7, which includes Clearwater and Lewis counties, and parts of Benewah, Latah, and Nez Perce counties. Priscilla Giddings lives in Whitebird, Idaho, which is about 200 miles north of Boise, but she spent much of her growing up years in the Idaho Falls and Ryrie area, I believe. She graduated with a BS in biology from the U.S. Air Force Academy and a Master's of Science degree in exercise and sports science from the California University of Pennsylvania. She served as B Flight Commander in the United States Air Force until 2014 and is currently in the United States Air Force Reserve. She achieved Top Gun status in the A-10 Warthog. She has spent over 1,000 combat hours over Afghanistan in the MC-12. She is author of a book called Curiously Strong, a female fighter pilot's story of developing strength, and there's some other copies of that book back there on her table. She and her husband, Matt, are the parents of 2 lovely daughters. And personally, I'd like to mention she is a legislative colleague of mine. We serve together on the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee. Let me tell you, that committee is a committee that likes to spend all of your money. It's billions of dollars every year. Not only do they like to spend it, they like to overspend it. But there's a couple of conservatives on that committee, myself and Representative Giddings, and once in a while we'll drag another one along. But there's 20 members on that committee, both from the Senate and House. I think it should be renamed, not the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, but the 18 ayes and 2 nays committee, because that's the vote a lot of times in that committee. I should mention too, before she comes up, Representative Giddings is currently running for Idaho's Lieutenant Governor. She's is a new member of Madison County Republican Women's Club. She is going to be an awesome Lieutenant Governor. Priscilla Giddings. I'll hold it. Sure. They're going to open the door now. Is that okay? Oh, it doesn't have. It's got a little bit.
Okay. Should I wait for it? Thank you, Representative Nate. Sure. Yeah. So when I was preparing my remarks, I looked on the website and they have a T6. And I flew a T6. And so they said, can we open the doors? And I said, yes. So I didn't actually fly that one. They have a new model that was brand new for the Air Force. But they named it after the T6 Texan. And so it's just such a special, I'm like a kid in a candy store right now. So special that we could have this here. So what's the consensus? Should we leave it open? Can you still hear me? Leave it open? Okay, we'll leave it open then, gentlemen, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Keys are in it, so be careful.
He said the keys are in it, so be careful. Oh, that's great. Gosh, what an honor it is to be able to celebrate 234 years of appreciation for America, for our constitutional republic, and each of our founding fathers who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish justice and liberty for all of us through our Constitution. It's so fun, as I've been saying, to join you in this museum, surrounded by all the aviation memorabilia. You know, on the side of the plane back there, it talks about, it's from Sigonella. I landed an A-10 in Sigonella, had a gear problem, so had to do some spins first. And then to see the old Air Force uniforms that I actually wore, the BDUs and then our ABUs that have now been retired, it makes me feel so young. But it's so much fun and such a privilege because flying has been such a strong part of my past. So much so that I made my campaign slogan, "Let freedom fly." So for those of you that don't know much about me, and Representative Nate said, I am currently a state legislator in District 7. He expanded and added a few counties to my district that aren't really part of my district yet, let's put it that way. And I am running for lieutenant governor, but tonight I want to set aside campaign discussions to celebrate our Constitution. I'm going to share a little bit about me and how I came to know and love our Constitution, and then how I fought to protect it with some stories, and then some of my thoughts on the significance in shaping our future. I remember learning about our Constitution and our founding fathers as early as kindergarten. I went to a small Christian school and we did plays and skits and dressed up as our founding fathers. And we really focused on the importance of our nation's founding. Later, I went on into public school, and those remembrances of the founders and the Constitution kind of tapered off gradually. And unfortunately now it seems like it's disappeared entirely in some of our schools lately. When I was about 10, my folks and I went on a year-long adventure to Israel, where my mom got a job as a counselor at the international school. It broadened my worldview, and I made friends from around the world. I got to walk in Jesus' footsteps. I saw the epicenter of the world's conflicting religions, and I literally witnessed terrorism firsthand. I saw the effects of conscripted military service, and I really internalized America's freedom, where we live in the absence of persistent fear, where we choose how we worship and who, and where military service has shifted to a voluntary basis. All are effects of our divinely inspired Constitution. You know, our nation is exceptional because of how our fathers translated their understanding of God's will for the way we should live into a system which allowed us to govern ourselves through the Constitution, like no other civilization has done in the history of the world. And so there at the age of 10, living in Israel, I realized how unique and significant our constitutional form of government was. And I knew that I wanted to serve to protect it. And so I set my first goal that I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. So I was in my sophomore year at Skyline when my mom got the principal's job up in Riggins. So off we went to the small town of about 490. And altogether, my mom spent 34 years in education, starting as a teacher assistant and then retiring as a principal. And my dad started off in Vietnam and then served 50 years in law enforcement, just retired in January as the Idaho County Sheriff. My parents' strong love for country and our rights constantly reinforced my respect for and our love for the Constitution. So as my senior year in Riggins, I served as a page down in the Idaho Senate, and I learned more importantly about the role that our state has in our own state sovereignty in the Constitution. And I never would have imagined that 20 years later I would be serving as an elected official in that building. So I was a page at the academy when I was told that I got accepted to the Air Force Academy. So off I went to the Air Force Academy, and 4 years later, at graduation, before throwing my cap into the air under a flyover of Air Force Thunderbirds, I took my first oath of office to protect and defend our Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I went on to pilot training, where I soloed a brand new T6 Texan. And then I actually got selected to go on and fly the A-10, which was a miracle in and of itself, the way it all happened. There was only one slot open in the A-10, and I got it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the A-10 Warthog, I'll just share with you. It shoots these. It was built around a Gatling gun, so it shoots 30 millimeters, about 50 rounds per second. We can carry 1,150 rounds in the belly, and it's pretty awesome. But through my entire flight training in the A-10, they have a range master out on the range who measures your bombs and bullets and how close they hit the target throughout the 8-month training course. And we got to the end of the training and I was ready to graduate. I'll tell you, it was hard, and I was ready to be done. I was the only woman in the class. I didn't think I was gonna make it. And we got to graduation day, And they said that I ended up winning the Top Gun award. I attribute that to my father teaching me how to shoot guns at a very young age. So in the Hague, it's a tradition that on every overseas mission, an A-10 pilot puts a folded up American flag in the front windscreen of the cockpit. It serves as a reminder that freedom isn't free and that our constitutional republic is worth fighting for. We were in Bulgaria, and I'd stepped to my jet, and I had my regular crew chief helping me with the walk around. But then one of the supervisors, the maintenance supervisors, came out from the hangar that was a ways away. So I was kind of, what's going on? You know, is something wrong with the jet? And so I stopped, shook his hand, and he pulled out a Ziploc bag that had a perfectly folded American flag in it, and it also had a list of names of countries and then pilot signatures. And he had had a pilot fly that flag for him in every country that he had served in. And that day he asked me to fly his flag over Bulgaria for him. What an honor it was to fly his flag for him, but you know what it did for me is it just reminded me the important lesson, patriotism is contagious. And he would be one of the main reasons why to this day I fly a flag near my front door every day, because when other people see it, it's definitely contagious, and it's a reminder of how amazing our constitutional republic is. During my service in the Air Force and as commander-in-chiefs and Supreme Court justices rotated, I quickly saw how top-down leadership affects our military. I started to witness the two opposing viewpoints of how our Constitution is interpreted. You have originalism versus a living Constitution. So the first, the originalist, the school of thought, proclaims really that our founders got it right the first time, that there are a few minor changes that could be made to clarify or to expand the intent of the founders, but that it's essentially all we will ever need and keep as the core of our government, and that any changes in its form or its interpretation of it should only be made carefully with great deliberation. But the second version, that ours is a living constitution, proclaims that it was merely a place to start and that we should modify it as needed or at the whim of the majority. This is increasingly a popular opinion, is that the founders couldn't and didn't really understand where we would be as a country, and that it's the prerogative of the current generation to amend its form or to change its interpretation as needed, almost at will. I was, in preparing for this speech, I looked up on our National Archives, the website, about Constitution Day. And this ideology of it being a living constitution was right there on the first page. It's apparent when they showcased a book called The People's Constitution. And right there under the book, it says, here's the authors discuss how generations have reshaped the US Constitution, and that it's a story of how we, the people, have improved our government structure and expanded the scope of our democracy during eras of a transformational social change. That's in reference to our Constitution. This just reveals how skewed their interpretation, one, that we're a democracy, which we're not, and two, that the Constitution has been reshaped. I believe our Constitution was divinely inspired, as he was talking about earlier, and needs to be respected as such. It's not just a piece of history subject to interpretation and revisionism, but it's the backbone of real law and justice. So during my time in Afghanistan, I witnessed the Afghanis try to establish the rule of law without a divinely inspired constitution. And we have all recently seen how quickly their government has reverted to that ancient theory that might equals right. Earlier this week, we commemorated the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks on our country. Over the past 20 years, we have lost 23 service members, 1,700 contractors, and then another 30,000 service members who took their lives as a result of their service in Afghanistan. These precious lives were volunteered and lost in the direct support of our nation's ideals in the form of love and respect of our Constitution. And I think right now I just want to take a moment and pause, because this has been a rough week for a lot of our veterans, and I would like to honor our veterans. And so if you served our country, do you mind, let's just go ahead and stand up, if you want to raise your hand instead. Those who have served our country, can you stand up, please? Thank you very much. I had a few opportunities to contribute to Operation Enduring Freedom, is what we called the operations in Afghanistan. I served in the 81st Fighter Squadron, flying A-10s. I spent one of my longest flights in the cockpit, flying over Europe, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, during a mission to transport our A-10s from maintenance depots to operations in Afghanistan. And that's I'm going to take a side note and share. One of the questions everybody asks me is, how did you get your call sign? Because in the fighter pilot world, the tradition of the call sign goes way back, and where they flew a lot of these airplanes, actually. And they wait for you to get to your first operational unit, and they wait for you to do something dumb, dangerous, or different. And then they have a ceremony where there's a little bit of debauchery that I do not condone or support. And then they tell stories about you, and it only has to be 10% truth. So being the only woman in a male fighter pilot squadron, I was a little concerned. But we back up a little bit, and when I was in Idaho Falls, I grew quickly. I was 5'9", 150 pounds. My dad said, well, honey, you're not gonna be a ballerina, so let's go to the gym. So we started weightlifting, and a coach down at the YMCA down in Idaho Falls, she said, well, let's do some powerlifting. So she got me into powerlifting. I went on to break national and world records for my age and weight class. And and that was kind of before it was popular. For a 16-year-old girl, it was a big deal at the time. Anyhow, I kept lifting at the academy and the Air Force. And when I got to my unit, and we were transporting these A-10s to the desert, and we stopped, and it was 2 in the morning, but I was jet lagging, so I went to a tent gym, and they had a sign up that said, if you could bench press 150 pounds, you get a free t-shirt. About with the base name on it. And so I was like, oh, sweet. I went and repped it out and got the free t-shirt. The next day, the guys were like, how'd you get the free t-shirt? And so I told them. So they took that story back to the naming ceremony, which was a little while later. And they said, let's name her Altoid because she's curiously strong. And I said, thank you, Jesus. I can tell my mother that story. But that's why I titled my book Curiously Strong. That's the backstory to that. Kind of fun. So after that, I went on to fly nearly 1,000 combat hours in the MC-12 as surveillance aircraft as part of the 4th Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron. And 2 of my deployments at Bagram Airfield in 2011 and 2012. And then I served a 3rd deployment to the Combined Air Operations Center, helping to oversee and deconflict air operations over the entire country in Afghanistan. So I was actually in Afghanistan when Osama bin Laden was neutralized. I think he was on the aircraft that taxied right in front of me at 3 a.m. During that same deployment, my crew provided a combined total of 12 hours of overwatch for friendly forces during some assault operations to clear the area after Extortion 17, full of SEAL Team 6, was shot out of the sky and ended up being the worst fallen angel event in the history of our nation since World War II. Those are some of the memories that made it tough to commemorate 20 years, especially as we know that it didn't have to end this way. As we witness Americans being slaughtered, Christians beheaded, and billions of dollars of equipment being given to the enemy of freedom, it's remembering Afghanistan that actually reminds us of how blessed we have been as a nation and as a free people for so long. As we watch now, our rights are literally being sold to the highest bidder, pillaged by ruthless outside interests, and even worse, it's happening with the help and connivance of our own government. This government is becoming a government that's spiraling out of control, and every right which is guaranteed to us within the Constitution and its amendments, particularly the Bill of Rights, along with all our other rights, are being seriously compromised. You know, it was James Madison, the author, the father of our Constitution, who reminds us that crisis is the rally cry of a tyrant. I thought that was interesting. And it was Lincoln, and you all know this one, who told us that it's we, the people, are the rightful masters of both the Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who would pervert it. So now I think it is time for us to spur one another, to unite and to stand fast behind our Constitution as it was originally penned. It has worked for nearly 250 years, and it can bring us together to climb out of the situation that we're in. The alternative is to watch all of our rights and freedoms crumble into nothingness, just as we watched that slip away for the Afghanis almost overnight. You know, it's going to take courageous leadership at all levels, starting with the family, locally, our school boards, all the way to the executive branch. Leadership that stands on constitutional principles no matter what the cost. You know, we got to lean on that First Amendment and let us use it boldly to speak freely, and the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms to fight off the tyrants that attempt to dilute these rights. Most importantly, though, in that Second Amendment, please keep buying ammo, because I'm sure I was just with an arms instructor the other day, and I had no idea how this blip on the screen got past me, but Biden just sanctioned all ammo coming in from Russia. No more ammo is allowed to come in from Russia. That's 40% of the ammo that we buy here in our country was just stopped. And we also need to stand with and behind that Fourth Amendment to keep us secured in our personage. And let's boldly proclaim the 10th Amendment and our state's rights, and ensure that we support the 14th Amendment to guarantee everyone receives due process. All these things that we've literally been fighting right here in Idaho just in the last few months. And let us not forget that we still have the right to vote, to work inside the process. And mind you, our elections could be better in Idaho, but they are still pretty darn good, and we need to count on that and use that to help us get out of this. You know, there were many hours that my crew and I flew over Afghanistan to help them secure free and fair elections so that they could vote. You know, it could be described as almost precariously thrilling to watch some young Afghani women meekly participate in the elections process. You know, they were so fearful of reprisal, but yet you could just see the hope in them that they might have the ability to impact change. And I compare that to the perspective of a voting Australian gentleman that I served with in Operation Enduring Freedom, who shared with me that voting in Australia is compulsory, and you had to pay a $15 fine back then, not sure what it is now, if you did not vote. You know, voting is such a fundamental right of our free nation, and we cannot afford to take it for granted. You know, locally we have city elections coming up in November, and then we have our statewide primary elections held in May. And I'll venture to say yet again, it will probably be the most important election in the history for the future of our state. I want to foot stomp the value and the significance of just one vote here in Idaho in that May election. If you take a quick look back at the 2020 election, we had 1.8 million Idahoans. We had 1 million registered voters, and we have closed primaries. So you can only vote in a primary if you're a registered Republican or a registered Democrat. We had 200,000 Idahoans vote as Republicans. They decided about 87% of the statewide offices in those 200,000 people did. Now you fast forward to the November general election where Trump was on the ballot. We had 550,000 Idahoans vote for Trump. So quick public math, that means we had 350,000 Idahoans who are pro-America, supported Trump, stand for conservative values, but they did not vote in the May primary. So overall, that's like 70% of conservatives in Idaho are either frustrated with the Republican Party or they don't realize how important that May vote is. So please, 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 if you are not registered as a Republican, consider it, because we need your vote in May. It's a huge, to only let 200,000 people decide, that's only letting 10% of our population decide the future of our state. So please, remember and encourage your friends, your neighbors, and your family to vote in May, because we need to exercise that right that so many have literally lost their lives for. You know, ladies and gentlemen, our Constitution is not a living document, not in the sense that those who would twist it to their own purposes would have it, but in another sense, it is the beating heart of our constitutional republic. It is the enduring gift of our benevolent God and of that unparalleled group of inspired men who drafted it nearly 2.5 centuries ago. It's the reason that our country has been the envy of the world for those centuries, and it's the reason that such an unbelievable, varied group, not one tied by a single religion, ethnicity, or origin, has stood together so strongly for so long. You know, our Constitution is and will remain the foundation of our country, and it has been an honor, and I will never forget to have served under it. It's been even more of an honor to be able to travel around the world, the country, and especially in this state, and meet all of you who love and honor and respect this inspirational document. You know, during these times and going forward, I have a great hope and anticipation that our Constitution will be the standard that we can all rally around. So we are in agreement with the previous speaker when he was talking about that. It's an immutable rock that holds the values of our country safe for ourselves and our children. Our challenge going forward will be to stand fast with our Constitution, to remain strong supporters of our rights, and to resist the push from the left to abandon or marginalize our Constitution, what they're doing right here in Idaho. And perhaps our strongest, most effective effort will be exactly what our founders did as they penned our Constitution, and that is to pray. I talked about voting, I talked about we need to buy ammo, but more than anything, we need to be praying as fervently as they did when they penned it. Please pray for our military now more than ever. Pray for the thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who are faced with making a decision to give up control of their bodily autonomy right now, or else they'll face a dishonorable discharge. Pray for our nation whose military is now what I would say the weakest that it has ever been in the history, according to all of our massing enemies. Pray for the Afghanis as the most extreme sect of Islam and their fundamentalists take over every aspect of their country. As the Chinese move in and plunder their property rights to ransack their treasure trove of rare earth minerals, and as the Taliban slaughter anyone professing faith in Christ or disagree with their radical views. Pray for our country, that our eyes would be opened to the attacks against our values, our Constitution, and our way of life. Pray for the sick who are being denied medical treatment right now for political reasons or their vaccination status. Pray for the employees that are right now losing their jobs and having to start new careers because of the mandates. Pray for our leaders, both for those who are fighting for our rights, but for those who have been misled and are taking our country and state down a path of destruction, that their eyes might be open to the consequences of their actions, and that their hearts might be returned to the fealty to our Constitution and our Republic. Please, please keep praying, keep buying ammo, and vote, vote, vote. So thank you all so much for this opportunity to the Republican women. I appreciate this. Thank you for honoring our Constitution on this special Constitution Day. Thank you for your willingness to stand up for our constitutional republic as it was originally written. I do have some political campaign flyers in the back and my book and other campaign information in the back. If you'd like to stop by, I'd love to answer any of your questions. May God bless each and every one of you, keep and protect our great state of Idaho, and restore the United States of America. Thank you.
You deserve it. Thank you. Thank you, Priscilla. And before she sits down, we'd like to have Kirk Latham come up from the Legacy Flight Museum. I think he's got a little presentation to make. And I think we can close the door now, too, if that's okay. It's a little cold up here. Kirk.
Hi, we felt it appropriate that we present you with this. Since you flew the T6, and something to remind you, so that you'll come back and fly this one.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Priscilla. Just so you know, while she's taking her seat, Priscilla will be back in Eastern Idaho on September 29th at the Stand Up for Idaho event in Idaho Falls at the Shiloh Inn. And so if you have questions about that, Doug Toomer is around here somewhere to fill you in on that.